Welcome, Colin Yates. I'm going to ask you a few questions about your artwork and your teaching. What is the Black Looks exhibition?
In 1997, 98, I started the Black Looks project, which traces the history of black and Asian professional footballers in the UK through a series of fine art portraits, 1863 onwards. It also includes player biographies and hidden histories of ethnic football.
Have you always been interested in football?
Oh my goodness. Well, it's the beautiful game and it's the most popular game in the world, so unsurprisingly, like thousands, millions of other young kids, I was besotted with football. So as a nipper, I used to play football in the street. I lived in a cul-de-sac, the Banjo, used to play football after school, played in primary school, secondary, and then when I went to art school, I played in the art school team there, which was deemed a little bit uncool. I was the only fine art guy in the team, but a great way to see. I studied at Norwich, a great way to see Norwich, great way to play against the fire station, the prison, the police, meet other lads. So fantastic, and I've always adopted that policy when I've lived in a new city. So for example, when I lived in Brighton, I played football there, had a great time, played a reasonable standard of football, and then moved up to Coventry and again met some a real cracking bunch of lads, attended the weddings, the christenings, the parties, all sorts of stuff, going out for drinks after the match. So besotted with football. Fortunately, when I was growing up, England won the World Cup in '66. I remember watching that on my own on the little black and white telly. That was brilliant. Celtic won the European Cup, and I can remember looking at the names of the players, thinking they were really outlandish. Jimmy Johnson and Bobby Auld and Bobby Murdoch, so really strange names for a little tiddler. And then of course Georgie Best come on the scene. Wow, what a film star, the fifth Beatle. I love Georgie Best. I've always watched a lot of football and been a keen historian. Not a great. I don't attend a lot of football matches, and I haven't got Sky. I've never had Sky. I wouldn't want that in the house. Football coach, qualified as a football coach, and I've been a player manager and a manager, and the player that talks behind everybody's back. So there you go. Yeah, I love football.
So why did you start the Black Looks project?
Well, I mentioned my passion for football and the camaraderie I had with the team I was playing for in Coventry, a multicultural team, as most teams in big cities are. And we were playing a game, ironically against another multicultural team, but one of our Asian lads, a young Asian striker we had, was getting horrendous racist abuse. And the ref set the protagonist off. But after the match, it really kicked off. The spectators and the opposition team attacked us, and we had to protect this young Asian lad. And it was horrible. If you see violence in the flesh, not in like a cowboy western, movie or something with Keanu Reeves, it's horrible. And there were spectators coming onto the field and hitting players. And fortunately, we're quite a physical team ourselves. We were big lads, so we were able to defend not only our player but ourselves. So it was horrible. I was really, really upset, and I'd started to create artwork about football a couple of years earlier, and then I thought, well, this is the big issue here. This is something I've got to deal with. It was right in front of me. So I thought, right, I'll start a project about black and Asian footballers. And my thinking at the time was just to have like a Hall of Fame, a sort of team of 11 landmark footballers that I could sort of display and educate young people, because that was my only way in.
Where did you discover the information regarding black footballers?
Well, when I first started the project, I approached the PFA. Brendan Batson was working for the PFA at the time, and he gave me a telephone number of a guy called Phil Vasili, who was working in parallel. He was doing a project about, he's a writer, an author, a researcher, and so he was working in a similar fashion, but I was working in the visual arts and Phil was writing. So he put me in touch with Phil Vasili. So I went to see Phil in his house in Cambridge, and my knowledge of football I thought was pretty good. I knew players in the 50s, you know, like Clyde Best, Albert Johansson, Ricky Heppelet, one of the few Asian players. But Phil gave me just this, he dialed my exhibition back from 1950 to way back to 1863. A day I'll never forget, because he brought out all these photos of Walter Tull, Arthur Wharton, Jack Leslie, Lindy Della Pena. It just was mind-boggling. So all of a sudden, from a shooting star project, I had, you know, a major scheme of work on my hands. So it was great.
I've noticed that you use a range of artistic styles in your work. Why is that?
Well, yeah, when you're at art school, you're sort of encouraged to just use one style, and then maybe, say, if you're a painter or a sculptor, you use that one style. And if you go into another medium, say if you go into print or textiles, you may use a slightly different style. But when I first started creating portraits about the black footballers, there were some footballers like Walter Tull and Arthur Wharton I wanted to treat with respect, and I would just draw them in a fairly traditional academic way. But there were other mavericks that I wanted to sort of make comments about, and you can take more risks and more sort of liberties. So, say for example, I did a portrait of Stan Collymore, who, you know, Stan blows hot and cold, and I thought of that in my head, and I thought hot and cold, thought a neon sign. So I started to do a different style, a neon style sort of Photoshop drawing, but that always to make a statement about the player. So I'm not really bothered if the art world sort of approves. It's what I do, and it's art with a message. So I'll use anything and anything that I fancy to make a statement.
Who has helped you and who has hindered?
Oh, that's a tricky one. When I first started out, as I mentioned, the Brendan Batson was great. Straight away the PFA gave me not a massive amount of money, but just a small sponsorship, so I was able to buy some frames. And it was called West Midlands Arts at the time. There was a guy called Mark Day who really helped me. I first did a proposal about football that was rejected, and then I came back with this Black Lux proposal, and again they supported me. So that was splendid to get support from the West Midlands Arts, who are now the Arts Council. I mentioned that Phil really helped me with his inspiration, his research. Big Sil Regis was great. I found that I had support of genuine football supporters. So say for example, I worked at the art school as a printmaking technician, and I came in one morning and the cleaner had got me a book from the library which he'd spotted. Really sweet, and some of the football lads on the travels used to pick up bits and pieces of information, say, oh, have you seen this, Cole? And give me the book. So that was really, really very kind. And yet, on the flip side of that, I got banned from using my own printmaking workshop by the art school in Coventry, which was outrageous, really. The only person in the faculty to be banned from using their own facility. So, you know, you just sort of put two and two together. It was institutional racism, the sort of management that made those decisions just didn't like what I was doing. And unfortunately, I didn't have an advocate there, so I didn't get any support from the academic staff. So I got in touch with Mark Day from West Midlands Arts, and he gave me a couple of studios. So I ended up going up to North Staffordshire, a lecturer at North Staffordshire hired me his workshop out. So I wasn't going to let them stop me, so I carried on and I flipped it. I think Johan Cruyff said, out of disadvantage comes advantage. So I used to go to this printmaking workshop and there was a little bunk bed there, and I used to work 12 and 16 hours, sleep, get out the bed the next day, do another 8 hours, and then drive back home to Coventry. So I was working full time at this point. So I didn't let it stop me. But as you can probably sense, I've never forgotten the faculty for their behaviour. It's disgraceful.
How did football supporters and the general public respond to your work?
Yeah, again, I think I'll probably echoed that with my previous comments. I can remember the lads when this exhibition first started, I was Flavour of the Month, and I had a show at the Herbert, I had a show at the Midlands Arts Centre, I opened the Memorial Garden with Phil's wonderful tribute to Walter Tull at the Sixfields Stadium, I had a show at the European Parliament in Brussels, and it was really very, very fast, but my football team that I played for, I think it was the first exhibition they'd ever seen. They came round to see my show in Coventry, and they didn't know how to view an exhibition. They were just sort of queuing up, and I said, look, you can go anywhere you like, you don't have to all queue up, you can just march around the place, it's not like in a supermarket checkout, you can go anywhere you like. So because I've got a range of styles, younger people were drawn towards the more sort of urban or street arts, and the sort of professional museum goers like the more traditional fine arty stuff. So in other words, good.
You won a Year of the Artist Award in 2000. What did you do?
Yeah, it was quite a privilege actually, because I worked as an artist in residence at Leicester City Football Club. I mean, as a football supporter working at a club, what's not to like? So I did workshops with schools, the Playing for Success Centre, and it sort of culminated in a big show at the New Walk Museum in Leicester. Originally I was supposed to have access to the footballers, but sometimes that can be tricky with sort of mid-management, and then they said, oh no, we don't want you sort of dealing with the players. So it was a bit of a blow, but again, out of disadvantage comes advantage. I created, in fact it was probably my most creative period for about six months. I devised a sort of way of making portraits using a sort of neon style. I did some digital photography, collaging images into the fabric of the football club. Did some new monoprint techniques. You just have to be inventive. So I just flipped it, and I produced some great work. Had a wonderful exhibition in the end at the New Walk with Big Cyril opening events, who was magnificent, sort of charmed everybody. And the lads at the staff at the museum were great. We used to have loads of meetings at the football club. It wasn't until about sort of 3 months in that I realised that they just loved turning up to that football club, because we'd be sort of all talking about how we were going to proceed with things, and I could see everybody just gradually looking over onto the football pitch and eyeing, as all football supporters do, the lovely green turf. So yeah, it was really, really marvellous. The way how to do my Black Lux project, in fact.
You mentioned that you have a portable exhibition. How does that work?
Yeah, this is a tricky one, because if you take original artwork into schools and they're framed up, it's you're a removals man, you're in and out with the frames, it's quite cumbersome. You take the artwork out the frames and you want to show kids up front, up close, and they, it's not their fault, but they don't know how to treat artwork. They're sort of fingering it, bending it. So I was constantly putting artwork in and out of frames. So I was looking for a device, and in the end I sort of did when you used to go to like Athena prints with the sleeves, and I found this sort of portable sort of format, a displayer. So I got my work scanned and photographed, or I put original work in, and then I was able to put in sheets with hidden history and information. So I got they could look and see a picture, say, of Jack Leslie, and then the anecdote about Jack Leslie and all the information. And the beauty of that is I could literally take it anywhere, an exhibition in a school, in a community centre, and I've even taken it onto a football stand, in the stand with the fans, and in pubs and clubs and community centres. So yeah, the way to go.
Do you work in many schools?
Oh God, yeah. Well, I qualified as a teacher way back down my time in Brighton. But I've worked with about 450 schools when I totted it up, and right across the board, nursery, primary, secondary, adults, higher. I call it my work with abbreviations. People not in employment and education or training. The needs, gifted and talented. My favourite sector is SEN. Working in SEN schools. When I was a young man, I found sort of disability, the emotion used to get in the way, and I used to sort of step back from it. As I matured, it didn't affect me in that emotional way, and I've always responded to kids who are not doing so well, to be perfectly honest. I always relate to those and want to help those kids. So yeah, I've done some absolutely huge projects with like 14 or 15 schools. So yeah, I love my teaching.
Looking back, have you had a favourite Black Looks exhibition?
Oh yeah, going to the European Parliament, and that was pretty good. When I worked at Leicester, John Williams, who's a big Liverpool fan and a fantastic author, works at De Montfort University. He got me in touch with Glyn Ford, I think he was, the MEP. It took me about 12 months to get over to Brussels, but that was a real experience. It's not very often you go into a European Parliament. The Leicester one was great. I mean, really, when you look at it, you want people who, and they're not just sort of ticking a box, which I have felt that some people do with this exhibition, because it does tick a lot of boxes. And the Leicester one, the guys were great. So the ones I look at, the Manchester Visitor Centre was a good one. If I can bring on board my educational work and do talks, and it's a sort of catalyst for other schools to come in and have a look at the exhibition and do their own thing, that's what really turns me on. But when I can sort of suss people out pretty quickly when they're just sort of not really treating me or the work or the content with respect. And
do you also include women's football?
Yeah, straight away. When I first started the project, I must admit I didn't have a female player in the 11, but when I went into the schools, you got 50% girls, so you got to include the girls and the teenagers and women. So I started to research the history of the women's game. I'm not going to neglect 50% of the audience there, and again it's remarkable stories, remarkable players, and I set up a sort of parallel project called Moving the Goalposts, the history of women's football, but instead of me doing all the work, I got about 8 other artists, mostly women. So yeah, I mean, again, for me now, that has, over the last decade, the rise of women's football has been magnificent, and girls, when I coach girls, they've always listened, always been receptive. So it's not one of those things where kids, when I used to come in originally, they used to think, oh, football, or the girls used to think, oh, I'm not into this. The girls are really into it now. There's so many, you related to the suffragettes, related to feminism. It's a brilliant subject.
And now, do you have any plans for the future?
Probably more of the same. I work on this project, not constantly, but I sort of, if I get a project, I'll sort of dip into it. I did an exhibition about Justin Fashanu last year at the Blue Door Gallery in Coventry, the first fine art exhibition about just in fashion. I'd like to promote that. There are a couple of things in the pipeline, but I'm a sole campaigner, and I'll just carry on in doing what I do. You know, racism is a complicated subject. You know, there are lots of layers to racism, so I'm learning all the time, and I'm just going to carry on. They're not going to stop me.
Thanks, Colin.
Cheers.